There are some things within the Christian faith that I have trouble reconciling with my own personal beliefs.
Okay, so now you mentioned that you have some problems with how Christians interpret the Bible, especially when it comes to social issues and things like that, and how Jesus would handle it. Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, like a lot of American Christians don't believe in government subsidized health care, and I think that personally Jesus, he preached for the poor, he preached for those in need, he helped all of them, but we as like American Christians always put them on the back burner. And we're like, no, actually we should, whoever can afford more should have a higher access, like a better access to medical care. Forget the single moms that live on the street working 3 jobs to raise their kid and they're all minimum wage. If you're a billionaire, you should be able to get whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very evident within since election season's coming up within the Republican Party, is they cut tax breaks for the billionaires all the time, but very rarely do things to help raise minimum wage so that people can be paid a livable wage.
Okay, so where did Jesus address these things? Because you said that Jesus addressed those things. Where did he address them?
No, I said that I believe that Jesus would have supported these things like universal health care.
Can you give me an example in the Bible where he would have done that?
Where he would have
Because it seems to me like you're
people?
anachronistically importing today's issues back into the Bible.
So you don't think that Jesus helped poor people in the Bible?
I'm just asking a question. Where in the Bible does that happen? Because Jesus' message was all about the gospel.
Right, but it was also about love and love thy neighbor.
Yes, and you know what the biblical definition of love is, Kimberly?
What is that?
1 Corinthians 13:6, love does not delight in unrighteousness. Love does not delight in sin.
Right.
And Jesus was all about calling people out for their sin.
I'm not saying he didn't.
Yeah,
But
that was his main message.
Greg Koukl, president and founder of Stand to Reason, recently wrote an article on the web called The Legend of the Social Justice Jesus. Koukl wrote, Jesus almost never spoke of the poor in spirit versus poor financially, for example. He went on to say, I could not find a single sentence where Jesus championed the cause of the poor, the outsider, or the disenfranchised as such. There's not even a hint of it, in the sense that it's commonly understood in the entire historical account of the life of Jesus of Nazareth. Did Jesus care about the poor, the downtrodden, and the marginalized? Yes, he also cared about the rich, the powerful, and the socially advantaged. Jesus cared about everyone, and he helped anyone who came to him, poor, beggar, or prostitute, wealthy, tax collector, or Pharisee. Greg's point is that the social justice warriors are always trying to quote the Bible to prove their case. However, the Jesus of the Bible came to preach about the poor in spirit, i.e. those who are poor towards God and his gospel. Check out his whole article here.
So just out of a friendly conversation, I'm just asking you, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, how familiar are you with the Bible?
Say probably a 6.
Okay, well, that's pretty good.
I grew up going to Christian school.
That's pretty good. So can you show me in the Bible where Jesus addressed the issues about minimum wage and health care and things like that?
They didn't have minimum wage in the biblical times.
Right, that's my point.
Okay, so where did it address weed?
Pardon me?
Weed.
Weed?
Why is weed wrong if it doesn't address it in the Bible?
Yeah, well, the Bible tells us to be sober-minded, and so that does address it in the Bible. But give me some more examples where you think, because you mentioned the social issues and you believe that the American Christians are against what Jesus would have taught. Can you give me some more examples and try not to so much get into politics?
So social issues are inherently political.
Okay. I would agree with you.
They're inherently political.
Yeah, but don't try to pit Republicans against Democrats and things like that.
Right. The way American Christians prioritize preaching against homosexuality rather than other sexual sins.
Okay. Are you saying that Christians don't preach against other sexual sins?
I'm saying that they shine a very primary light on homosexuality rather than sins like masturbation or like premarital sex. Like, I would say that 9 times out of 10, if you are at a sermon and they're talking about sexual sin, especially at the church I grew up going to, it was homosexuality every single day.
Well, I would tell you, Kimberly, the churches that I've been at, it's been very balanced. And when they teach against sexual sin, they don't just teach against homosexuality, they teach against fornication. They teach against incest. They teach against pedophilia. They teach against
Right.
all of that. So it's not so much that, but it's a balanced view, because any type of sin in the sexual area is going to happen outside of the marriage between a man and a woman in a monogamous marriage. That's what Jesus said. Yeah.
Right, I'm familiar with the biblical view of what marriage should be.
Say again. I'm
I
sorry.
said I'm familiar with what the biblical view of marriage is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So I'm curious why you brought up the homosexual issue then.
Well, I think this is a free country, and this is not a Christian country. People have every right to marry whoever they want, and I think that they should have that right. I
Okay.
think that when people try to instill religion into laws in this country, it's only the religion that they want. And if we took any other religion and said, okay, well, now we want Islam to be the state religion, I don't think you would like that very much. So
Kimberly-
I think it's unfair to say, well, this goes against my religion, so you can't do it. It's like saying you can't eat that cookie because I'm on a diet.
Let me give you a real scenario here, Kimberly, and get your opinion on it, all right?
All right.
Woody Allen, the famous actor and director, are you familiar with him? Okay. He and his wife, Mia Farrow, they raised this child to adulthood.
Right?
When that child became an adult, guess what Woody Allen did?
What?
He married her.
Right.
Is that okay?
No, because incest actually.
Wait a minute, you said you should be allowed to marry whoever you want.
So,
Why is that different?
yeah, so there's a difference because incest causes societal harm, same as rape or pedophilia.
Wait a minute. They adopt the child. It's not incest.
It's legally incest.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. I am adopted, dude. I wouldn't push the adoption argument with me.
Yeah,
I'm gonna-
incest involves DNA. The DNA is not a factor here.
Not legally. If I were to go try to sleep
I
with one
wouldn't
of my
say it's. I
siblings-
wouldn't say it's legally, Kimberly. I would say ethically you would be right, but not legally.
No,
because he did marry, and there was no pushback. He was allowed to do it. There was nobody that says this is illegal. You can't marry her.
Okay. Well,
So, how does that fit into? You ought to be able to marry whoever you want. If that's the case, then Woody Allen should have been able to marry his daughter, right?
well, he was able to marry his daughter, wasn't he?
Okay, but I'm asking you, is that okay?
I think that morally, since that can cause societal harm, no, it's not okay.
Okay. So
Being
I wouldn't.
gay doesn't cause
So
societal harm. It just bothers you.
Yeah, so I wouldn't disagree with you on the first point. But you see, you just put up a fence there. You put up a fence.
Right.
So why wouldn't Christians be allowed to put up a fence based on God's word?
They are in their opinion, but not on state legislature when we have a country that's prided itself on freedom of religion.
Right. So let me just mention some things here, because you seem to make a general statement that homosexuality is not harmful in any way. Would that be correct? Did I hear you right?
Yes.
Okay, so let me give you some statistics here, and you tell me what you think about this. All right. These are facts.
Right. Sure.
And as a defense attorney, you should appreciate that, right?
Right.
But potential defense attorney.
Right.
Homosexuals are 9 times more likely to contact HIV.
Right.
70% of the AIDS cases come from homosexuality.
Right.
20% fail to disclose their HIV status to their sex partners.
Right.
That's pretty dangerous. That's not some kind of a generic, they're in love, it's okay. HIV is leading to anal cancer. It is almost universal amongst men homosexuals. Also, there's an alarming increase of lesbians at battered women's shelters. The National Violence Against Women Prevention Research Center reports up to 45%, Kimberly, 45% of lesbians report having been the victim of at least one act of physical violence perpetrated by a lesbian partner. And people speaking out against homosexuality can be jailed, fined, or canceled by our society. So I wouldn't say that I agree with you, Kimberly. I appreciate that you have that opinion, and I respect that, but I wouldn't agree with you that homosexuality is some kind of thing
Right.
that is not hurting our society.
Right,
I would
okay.
disagree with that.
With this logic of, oh, well, this statistic says that lesbians have a high likelihood of being abused by their lesbian partner, well, then heterosexuality is wrong too, and it also causes societal harm.
No, you're talking about abusive heterosexuality.
You're talking about abusive homosexuality.
Hey, Kimberly, I'm not. I didn't add that qualification. I think homosexuality is intrinsically abusive. It's abusive amongst its partners. It's abusive that it does not allow for a mother and a father in marriage. There's an old saying that mothers raise boys and fathers raise men. So I think that in a homosexual situation, especially in the homosexual marriages, you're not allowing that child to grow up in a healthy father-mother relationship. And so my point, Kimberly, is
this. You mean like how 90% of mass shooters come from heterosexual parent households, or how 90% of abusers come from heterosexual parent households?
Yeah, and you know why that is, Kimberly? Because the homosexual population is less than 5%.
You're right.
That's why.
But you have
and so those numbers would make sense then.
It's miraculous, really. They're 5% of the population, but your entire argument is saying that they're all abusive, they're all horrible, they're all sinful. You're sinful too.
Yes.
You're
right about that. That's the one thing we agree on so far, Kimberly.
The difference between their sin and your sin is their sin is love and yours is hate.
How do you come to that conclusion? Please explain that to me.
You are alleging that it is inherently abusive to be a homosexual, something of which scientists have come to the conclusion is not a choice.
I just gave you all the statistics, and that's why I backed it up.
Dude, I could rip out statistics of heterosexual abuse. That doesn't make heterosexual relationships inherently abusive. My mom and dad are heterosexual.
So my point, just so we understand, Kimberly, is that yes, I do believe that homosexual relationships are a violation of God's creation.
That's different than being inherently abusive.
But I'm leading up to my point, all right? It's a violation of God's creation. God created male and female. So it's a violation of God's creative order. And because of that, because it's going to be an abusive sin type situation, and it is, the statistics prove it out. And when we have a proper, healthy heterosexual situation, which most of the heterosexual couples are, it's a healthy situation. Yes, you can quote 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever it is. Most of it is healthy. That's God's default position. And they're doing it the way that God says it's supposed to be done. And they're raising families the way that society knows that it's supposed to be done. Without a mother and a father, the kids are not going to have a chance to become the people that they should be. That's my point.
So if I wasn't adopted by my very kind, very amazing
You were adopted,
parents,
right? Okay.
So if I wasn't adopted by them and I was raised by my single mom that gave me up for adoption, I wouldn't be the same person I am now. I wouldn't have as much moral value because one person raised me and I didn't have a man.
I never said that. And besides, you have a mother and a father who adopted you, right?
Yeah, I'm giving you a hypothetical.
Yeah. For centuries and millennia, households have known that this is the norm. This is how the homosexual model of marriage, which I don't really believe is a marriage, has only occurred in just a blip of time.